So now we'll start with the next chapter, that is 15th chapter, our environment. So you all have already studied about our environment in the class 6th, 7th, 8th. So we'll be again learning once more, we'll be revising and also we'll be adding on some of the points into our environment lesson. So these, according to the point wise, we'll go with the lesson now. So first point is lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere. Second is types of waste, ecosystem, trophic level, food chain, food web, pyramid, 10% law, bioaccumulation, biomagnification, depletion of ozone, and managing garbage. So first we'll look into what is an environment. Environment means all the things that exist on this earth. That can include non-living things, that is abiotic factor, and living things, that is biotic factor. Abiotic and biotic factor. So we'll understand what is lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. So lithosphere is solid Earth's crust. Solid Earth's crust is known as lithosphere. What is hydrosphere then? All of you know that. Hydrosphere is the part of Earth that consists of water. It can be water bodies, it can be ocean, sea, river, etc. So then we look into atmosphere. Atmosphere is the amount of air present in the earth. So we have seen what is lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. Lithosphere is the solid Earth's crust. So the solid part of the earth that can be landforms. Hydrosphere, it is the water bodies that is found on the earth, and atmosphere is the air present. So air also consists of amount of oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and other gas contents that totally represents the atmosphere. So next we will go with the second one, that is types of waste. So all of you know that what is a waste? Waste is the things that cannot be used or we cannot use it for any other purpose is known as waste. As a simple sentence, waste directly means that it cannot be further used. But in waste also we can segregate into two types. So types of waste. Biodegradable and non-biodegradable. So the name itself suggests that biodegradable wastes are those wastes that can be decomposed by some certain microorganisms. So biodegradable wastes are those that can be decomposed by life processes or living organisms. Example such as microorganisms. So what about non-biodegradable waste? The waste that cannot be decomposed by living organisms. Cannot be decomposed by any living or non-living factors. So example, we all know, common example is plastic. Then certain metals, metal cans, etc. So biodegradable example we can give that it is plants. Plants can be vegetable waste, vegetable peels, paper, etc. So we know that in general sense waste means we say that it is a waste which is not used for anything and we can be discarding it. But again we can segregate into two different types, that is biodegradable and non-biodegradable waste. Biodegradable waste are those waste that can be decomposed by the certain organisms that is present in the soil. Example, those waste that can be biodegradable or degraded, that is plants, vegetable peels, paper, etc. Non-biodegradable waste remains in the soil for millions of years and it doesn't get degraded or decomposed. That is like plastic, metal cans, etc. So we need to avoid the usage of non-biodegradable wastes. So next, third one, we see ecosystem. Ecosystem. So what do you mean by an ecosystem? We'll give example of a garden. So garden, we have seen that garden has a lot of plants in it, some animals. So these plants and animals are directly or indirectly dependent on certain abiotic factors such as sunlight, temperature, humidity, rainfall, etc. So ecosystem is a place where both abiotic and biotic factors are interlinked together for the survival of the biotic factors, is known as ecosystem. So these ecosystem can also be divided into two types, that is natural ecosystem and artificial or it can also be called as man-made. Man-made ecosystem. So as the term gives natural ecosystem, it is already available on the planet. So existing forms of biotic and abiotic factors in the life forms. So artificial or man-made, that we humans have created it. So natural ecosystem example we can give as forest, lakes, river, ponds, etc. So artificial ecosystem example is garden, crop field. So next we will go with trophic levels. So what do you mean by trophic levels? So trophic level always starts with sunlight as a source of energy. That also includes, this is an abiotic factor that is linked to biotic factor as a main source, that is producers. So like we can say sunlight is obtained by the plants, which are also known as producers, that is interdependent. This plants or producers are eaten by the consumers. So these are the various trophic levels. That is, we can see that. So from the plant, it starts first trophic level, second trophic level, then it is the decomposers. Third trophic level. Why plants are called the first trophic level? Because it receives the required energy from the sunlight for preparation of its own food, and also it stores the food in the form of glucose, and also it transfers the energy in the form of food to the rest of the living organisms. So next in this level, after the plants, are the consumers. Consumers can also be herbivores, carnivores, omnivores as such. Example is human beings, omnivores, or top carnivores. So these consumers on death needs to be decomposed. That also requires some energy. So the energy stored in the consumers after the death, it is used by the decomposers for breaking down of the dead bodies, and this again releases the matter in the form of abiotic factors back to the atmosphere. So trophic level always starts with abiotic to biotic and again back to abiotic. So here we can say that producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. So producers as such are plants, primary consumers can be taken as rat. Rat again is eaten up. Secondary consumer eaten up by snake. Snake is eaten up by hawk. So here we can use another term, that is plants can also be eaten up by rat. Rat can also be eaten up by frog. Frog in turn by snake. Snake in turn by hawk. So these are the various trophic levels, that is first trophic level, second trophic level, third trophic level, fourth, and finally we have 5 trophic levels in the ecosystem. So next we will see food chain. The trophic levels are directly related to the food chain. So next we will take the same example. To avoid the extinction of certain levels of organisms, we need to see that each trophic level of organisms survive so that one or the other organisms do not get extinct, and later on the whole world will get into a mess. So we will see that food chain. So example, again we will take grass. Grasshopper. Grass is eaten by grasshopper. Grasshopper is eaten by frog. Frog is in turn eaten by snake. Snake. Snake by hawk. So this is an example of food chain wherein it is interlinked by certain organisms or animals that are interdependent on one another for the food and energy. So there is also that these are dependent on food for their survival, and also the energy is flowing from the producers to the consumers, and finally after the death it is also taken up by the decomposers. So you can see that grass is eaten by the grasshopper, grasshopper is in turn eaten by the frog, frog in turn by the snake, snake in turn by the hawk. So this is an example. So taking another example, grass can also be eaten by a rat. A rat in turn can be eaten by a frog. A frog, again the chain continues, frog is eaten by snake, snake is eaten by a hawk. Here we can see that if it is, this is in land ecosystem. We are taking the example of a ecosystem of land. If we are taking the ecosystem of marine ecosystem or aquatic ecosystem, we can see that grass is eaten by small fish, big fish, or big fish is taken off by some of the birds. So you can see that this grass is eaten by, this grass is again here it is linked, it is eaten by small fish, big fish and birds. So these birds can in turn eat the snake of this particular food chain. So you can see that the interlinking of the two or more food chains together to form a web-like structure is known as food web. So interlinking of food chain, interconnecting of two or more food chain and flow of energy from one another is known as food web. So here food web example is, again we will take certain food chains, grass, deer, tiger, grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, hawk. So grass can also be eaten by rat. Rat in turn is eaten by snake, snake to hawk. So this form of interlinking of the food chain is known as food web. So now we will see the pyramid. Pyramid is the flow of energy or transfer of food materials from one level to the another trophic level. That is pyramid. We will take the same example now. Here comes the plants, first plants or the producers, then we will see grasshopper, then we will see the frog, then snake and hawk. So this is a pyramid wherein the food gets transferred, food along with energy gets transferred from one level, trophic level, to the other. So next we will see what is 10% law. So it is most important thing to learn 10% law, wherein you can see that the energy requirement of plants is derived from the sunlight. Enormous amount of sunlight is taken in by the plants to prepare its food. So, lot of energy is taken in and some amount of energy is stored in the plants. Say, for example, 10,000 joules. 10,000 joules is what plant is produced. So, you can see that only 10% of 10,000 joules will be transferred to the next level, that is to the grasshopper. So 10% of 10,000 is only 1,000 joules of energy will be transferred from plants to grasshopper, because there the production of energy is 10,000 joules. The plants has a lot of activities, like again they have respiration, then preparation of food, same in other various processes, that more energy is utilized for its own purposes. From there it is getting transferred only 1,000 joules when the grasshopper eat the plants. In the same way, even grasshopper has its own functions, like taking in food, digestion, excretion, then any other physiological process like walking, running, jumping. So all these energy get lost here, and from here again only 10%, that is 10% only gets transferred from the 1,000 joule, so it becomes 100 joules. So frog species receives only 100 joules of the energy from that of the grasshopper. Again the same process from frog to snake. Snake receives only 10 joule of the 100 joule. And from snake to hawk, we can see that the last trophic level receives very low energy from that of the second or third trophic level, that is 1%, that is 1 joule. That is 10% of the 10 joule of energy. So, energy is transferred as per 10% law. Only 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to the another trophic level. And by the time it reaches the last trophic level, only 10% of the total energy is provided to the last trophic level organisms. So let's imagine that, take a food chain, example the same food chain, grass is eaten by grasshopper, which in turn is eaten by frog, frog is eaten by snake, snake is eaten by, okay let's write like this, frog, snake, hawk. So let's take that if any one of the species in this particular food chain completely dies. So what happens to the other organisms in the food chain? So what happens to the other organisms in the food chain? You can see that grass is eaten by grasshopper. Grasshopper was previously eaten by frog, but now the frog is not at all there, it is almost extinct. And you can see that there is a rise in the number of grasshoppers. There is a rise in the number of grasshoppers and rise in the number of snakes. So what happens here? When there is a rise in the number of grasshopper, it will utilize almost all the availability of grass